Hey, good afternoon, everybody. All right, PJ, you want to get us going?
Yeah, Chris, let's do it. All right, guys. I appreciate you guys joining us today, and this will be recorded for anybody that could not hop on during the live session. And we'll definitely send that link out once we have it processed. But really today, Chris and I just wanted to really take what you, the operators, wanted to know about how your operation and risk management and insurance all, you know, live together and work together, and how what you can do as an operator to better improve your insurance program, both from a cost and coverage perspective. So again, this is about controlling your risk, controlling your costs, and going into the strategies that you as the operators can be implementing to long-term improve your standing in the insurance marketplace.
Before we get into some of the details and stuff, let's talk about who Granite Insurance is and why Granite. Just a little bit of high-level information here. So we've been in business for 90 years now, but we specialize in what you guys do. Our adventure entertainment program was founded in 2012, primarily with zip lines and aerial parks. We've since expanded that into the other verticals that you see there. We started working with watersport operators about 4 years ago. And as you can imagine, none of these verticals are easy to insure. And this is where we excel. So what we did in each of these verticals, including watersports, is we identified a need that those particular verticals had, a need for an advisor that understands their operations, that has relationships with the carriers that will write your insurance, and an advisor that can provide risk management tools and resources to help you be a better operator and control your insurance cost. And so with all these verticals, watersports was the same thing. When we got in, we realized that there were a lot of the same needs and more. We originally spent time talking to people like Kevin O'Neill and Jason Schilder and others to learn what were the pain points in the industry, what are the trends that we're seeing, what could we do to bring value, and we set out to create a solution for that. In my opinion, the most valuable thing that we do or that we bring to the table is guidance on best practices, resources, and we'll dive into those a little deeper in a second. The second thing is we created an exclusive program to address the challenges on the carrier side of things. You had some carriers that would write jet skis, but only if they were guided, or they would write boat rentals, but not charter tours, and they wouldn't cover in-water activities. So we set out to create a solution for all of that. And it is an exclusive program only to us. It's available only to elite operators. We still have the other carriers and options, but for those that qualify for our program, it's been a game changer.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, so we wanted to tailor today's presentation to what you, the operator, wanted to know. Where's your biggest pain point? So we went straight to the source with that, and into that Awkward Watersports Facebook group that Kevin and Greg have put together with so many of you that are part of that group and attending today, and just kind of gave you guys 4 or 5 different topics that we felt is aligned with what we hear from you when we talk with you. So obviously, number one by a big margin is what is driving rate increases and what you can do to control your costs. So again, that's going to be the main point that we're talking about today. But we also wanted to get feedback for all of these items that people were chimed in on and added to the poll. We want to give you that overview of what the insurance marketplace looks like currently, as well as what to be aware of and be thinking about, because again, water sports is a very specialized and unique industry, and it has very unique risks that are sometimes very well accounted for in insurance policies, and sometimes they are definitely not. So we want to kind of give you guys an idea on a very high level of what to look for there. And then go again to how do we control your costs? Well, let's talk more about being proactive and with risk management documentation, how you run as an operator. No longer can you just simply say, hey, I have this many boats, this many jet skis at this mooring location, and give me a quote. It is much more selective, both with our exclusive program and in the open marketplace. where the more we can tell a story for an operator and the more we can show, hey, you're the best of the best, you're going the extra mile to keep your customers safe, to keep your captains and your crew safe, and show that both on paper and in day-to-day operations, is going to have so much different impact on what options are available to you and what those costs look like. And then again, just want to kind of hit a refresher on, what does the claims process looks like when you do have an incident and what to expect. And then more so like, how do we best prepare you to make sure when that claim happens, not if, that you're prepared and know what to do to best put yourself in a position where the insurance company feels that they can step in and protect you and defend you and not have a, 6-figure or more claim on your loss record. And then last but not least, there was some thought on, hey, what else is available out there? What does the marketplace look like? What is the feasibility for different alternative solutions? So we wanted to just kind of be transparent and give some feedback and thought to that, because that is very, very similar to why we set up this exclusive program for elite operators. Goes into that colorful added topic there by Daniel of, more or less not dealing with insurance anymore and having a cooperative. So.
Yeah, and PJ, before we go to the next slide, I'll say I don't think it was a surprise. I know it wasn't to me or PJ that topic was leading, and nobody likes to write a check for their insurance. They all want to know how to get it less expensive. And the truth of the matter is, all of these topics, with the exception of Daniel's the one that he added, but they all are part of controlling your costs. So they're all relevant for the main idea that you guys, what's important to you guys.
Thanks, Chris. So just want to give you guys a quick summary of what does the insurance marketplace look like for water sport operators, and some folks, especially if you're new to the business, if you're starting out this season or 1 or 2 years, you may not have a full real understanding and contrast compared to when you purchase your auto insurance or your homeowner's insurance of, what is the expectation? What does the process look like for purchasing insurance, right? So for most small businesses on Main Street, America, your flower shops or your bakeries, you're going to have hundreds of, if not more, insurance companies to choose from. Again, Watersports is still very much so small and selective pool of carriers that understand the industry, that understand the operations, and are comfortable offering coverage. So again, when we're talking with clients, we have our own program, but beyond that, in the open marketplace, again, there's really only, depending on your type of operation, 4 or 5 different avenues for coverage that we feel comfortable offering to our clients. And then, in some cases, if you're a more nuanced operation with unique, activities, different things of that nature, it could be even smaller to 1 or 2 options total. The main thing to understand is, you can't just say, oh, I have an insurance policy and think you're adequately protected. Not all the insurance companies are built to be tailored to water sports. The unfortunate truth is there's insurance companies out there today that, really exist to more or less pull the rug out from under you. And if you don't read the fine print of what they are providing protection for, and more importantly, not providing protection for, you're going to be in a very difficult and unhappy position when a claim happens, and aligning yourselves with a broker like Chris and myself and Granite is why that's so important to be able to understand. What we kind of alluded to is the good, the bad, and the ugly of the marketplace. And also in the insurance company perspective is no 2 policies are the same, right? I mean, there's exclusions, there's limitations, there's coverage structures that can significantly impact and change how your operation is protected, or more importantly, not protected with what your insurance program is. And again, is what we're seeing in trends in the marketplace is, there's carriers exiting the market, there's carriers entering the market, but more or less the mainstays of the programs that have offered coverage for water sports for many years is they're looking much more detailed, harder, and closer at your risk management. And it's not really optional anymore, right? It's in order to qualify for our program, for many insurance programs, you've got to put a lot of time, energy, and effort in to show what that risk management investment is for your operation and go from there. And again, the biggest challenge I see in talking with a lot of folks, is if you are starting out first season, year one, year two, and you're saying, hey, I want to grow my business, I want to do it the right way. But I'm going to start off with one boat or two jet skis or anything like that. Just understanding that, the options that are out there for that demographic and that segment of the business right now, you're going to have to be prepared to start at, $10,000-$15,000 a year in insurance, just given the aspect and what you guys are in the water sports industry and the risks associated. So, gone more and more or less, insurance companies aren't willing to take that risk on an operator and expect to pay, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 for 1-2 vessels. So, just understanding that startup cost for a new venture is important as well. But bottom line, again, is more risk management, more investment in safety, and what we've kind of come to find through working with partners like, AutoTrack and Take My Boat Test and Wave Res and all the kind of the thought leaders in the industry is, again, the more you do for your business up front, be proactive, the better options and better costs we're going to have on the insurance side of things.
BJ, I know you're going to dive into this, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but you mentioned carriers coming in and getting out, and you keep talking about, you've driven home the point of safety and risk management best practices. Again, I don't want to steal your thunder, and I hope I'm not stepping on your toes by saying this, but I just want to point out that part of the reason there's been so much volatility is because underwriters weren't requiring these things. So maybe a carrier came in, they knew there was a lot of premium available in the water sports world, but they didn't really know how to underwrite it. So now the ones that have survived or entered understand the importance of that. And that'll be a common theme in kind of what we're talking about is some of this risk management and documentation, et cetera.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, definitely a little stepping on the toes, but I'll let you slide. But you see that second bullet point there is, again, inadequate underwriting and pricing. So we want to talk about rate increases. So people wanted to know, what is the why behind it? And some people, may not really care. They're just frustrated because they feel like they are running a good operation and they're having to pay for the mistakes and the shortcomings of the rest of the industry that's pulling them down, which can more or less be the case. But just kind of giving some thought and context to what the environment has been in water sports, right? So I remember at the port conference last year, they were talking a lot more on the economic side of the water sports industry and how much business volume has exploded and started to come back down to normal levels, but still pretty significant since COVID. So from 2020, 2021, 2022, people were tired of being in their homes. They got out, they got on the water, and water sport operators saw a huge boom, right? So we saw new operations coming in, people adding vessels, people getting on the water that have never really been on the water before, right? So we had this extremely significant increase in volume, which was great for the bottom line for operators, for the industry overall. But that did lend itself to a lot of customers that have never been on a jet ski, have never really operated a vessel, consistently, and just different things, different situations that really led to a significant uptick in, that 2021 to the last couple of years, just accidents and incidents that are really just kind of driving that threshold. It's like, okay, hey, insurance companies are starting to see more claims coming in, and then it directly tied into those insurance companies that didn't have good underwriting guidelines, that weren't adequately pricing for the operations they were providing coverage on. All lended itself to, again, them experiencing a negative claim result overall, to where they had to then adjust, sometimes more significantly and dramatically, or come out of the market altogether. And then the other thing to that point is, again, that social inflation, right? So you have all of this, you have increased customer volume, you have not only just increased customer volume, but inexperienced customer volume. You're sharing the pot with unexperienced operators that weren't investing in risk management, that were just fly by night and increasing the chance for people to get hurt. And the people that were getting hurt, we're seeing social inflation, which year over year continues for every industry, but especially amusement, especially recreation, the penalties and the judgments for damages on these scenarios and these industries just continue to exponentially grow with the insurance companies, fighting those claims and different things of that nature and having to pay out, 10, 20, 30 times in some cases what they were 5, 10 years ago. All of that comes back to the bottom line for the insurance companies. And then you can see certain things are really just, first time operators, alcohol related claims, and then, in water activities, towed water sports, all of those things lend itself to more high severity scenarios.
One thing I don't think we mentioned, the chat feature's turned off in here, but the Q&A button is working. Feel free, we'll have Q&A at the end, but feel free to hit that, pop a question over there in the chat as we're going through this. We'll make it as interactive as we can. And if we need to elaborate on some things, you have questions that pop up, go ahead and share those in real time if you want to. So you've got a little bit of history on, the last few years, the water sport insurance and why we are where we are. Now let's talk about what you can do to kind of take control, make sure that you are in the right spot to get the appropriate coverage at a fair price. When we first got into this, I mentioned their names earlier, but we talked to some of the leaders in the industry, and one of the common themes that I kept hearing is there is no governing body, no ASTM or governing body that tells us what we need to be doing. You have some operators who have done a phenomenal job just figuring it out, by hard lessons learned maybe, or by learning lessons from other operators. You've got some people in the water sports group that are happy to share what they've learned from their mistakes, but there's still no set standard. So part of the value of what we try and bring to the table, I mentioned earlier, is what are best practices and what can you do and what should you be doing to take control and to be an elite operator. And I'm not going to read the entire list here. You can go through those, but I will touch on some of them. Some of them are really obvious. Others may not make sense. And you may be doing them to some degree, but may not be documenting it. I'll give you an example. So I can't imagine any of you guys would send a pontoon rental out in the middle of a storm with a small craft advisory, right? That's common sense. But how many of you are keeping daily weather logs? And that may sound like just one more headache or hoop that you have to jump through and have to deal with, but here's why it's important. So let's imagine it's a typical Florida afternoon with blue skies when you send them out, and then an unexpected thunderstorm pops up and something happens. Maybe people are scrambling around to get their phones in a dry spot. The captain's freaking out, trying to figure out how to get to shelter quickly. Somebody goes overboard and it's a problem. 3 years later, and you'll hear me use the term or use the timeline of 3 years because in most states, that's the statute of limitations for bodily injury. And attorneys use that as a strategy. They will a lot of times not file the suit until the end of the statute of limitations because they think you didn't do these things. So you had this incident in a thunderstorm. 3 years later, you get a letter from an attorney saying that you're going to be sued, and the allegation is that your employees knowingly sent somebody out into dangerous conditions. You knew that wouldn't have happened because that's how you trained your employees, but you need something to back up that defense. If you're able to go back to your logbook and see, no, actually on the day of the incident, it was a clear day with 20% chance of isolated thunderstorms, and you have a documented emergency action plan for weather emergencies, it's going to be much easier to defend, and that plaintiff attorney is going to have a much harder time proving that you were guilty of negligence. So again, some of these things make common sense, but the documentation of them is extremely important. And that's just one example. We could go through and apply that to almost everything on there. There's a reason that these things are needed. And when you're doing these things, it's showing the underwriter, whether they're required or not, it's showing the underwriter that you are a best-in-class operator and that you're doing things for the right reasons, not just to check boxes for the underwriter, but you're actually wanting to be a better operator. That's going to make you more attractive to them, which is ultimately going to drive your costs down, your insurance costs down. So these are things, and I'll wait right there just a second. Again, these are kind of the documentation that you're going to want to have in place and execute, not just have an employee handbook, but actually train your employees through it, document their training, etc. And then the things on the previous slide there were things you need to do ahead of time. Like I said, to lessen the likelihood of something happening and to build a defense in case it does. But you can do all those things. You can do everything right. But if you're in business long enough, something's going to happen and you're going to have a claim. You need to be prepared when that happens. And the first 24 hours after an incident can be the difference between a claim going away altogether, settling for $2,000, or going to court and costing $200,000. I could spend a ton of time talking about nothing but incident response. In fact, we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, an hour-long webinar on nothing but incident response. There's a link to that recording. Happy to send that to you if you want to check that out. We've also got some resources such as incident reporting templates on our website. But I'll keep this brief. I won't go into all those details of every step of this, but the first and most important thing, obviously, is to take care of the injured person, get them stabilized, away from further injury, and get medical care if needed. From there, you're going to need to be intentional about what information you collect, what information you put in emails, which are all discoverable when it goes to court, how you interact with the injured person and their family, both during the moment as well as days after the moment. And these are all things that need to be well thought out and prepared in advance, including making sure your employees are trained on what to happen. When things are chaotic, somebody's hurting, things are going on, that's not the time to try to figure out what to do, or to have a 19-year-old dock hand trying to figure out, hey, what do I do about this? Have everything in place, make it clearly communicate that to all team members so that when something happens, it's a executed response that is with intentionality.
And Chris, one item on going back to the documentation standpoint, just so anybody listening to this or checking it out in the future understand, like, a lot of operators, especially the startups, the smaller ones, don't have, they have maybe one or two of these or maybe none. So understand, your operation is unique and everything of that nature. You're going to know it better than we are, but we do and are putting together templates that are just more, boilerplate, standardized, just generic for water sports in general. So, if you need kind of we're not going to necessarily want to do it for you top to bottom, but if you need kind of a vision or a starting point for any of those documents, happy to connect directly with you and provide some context and template documents for those specifically.
That's a good point, PJ. And I'll piggyback on what you just said to reiterate. We can send you templates. You can use ChatGPT to create templates or whatever to accompany the submission and make the underwriter happy. That's only part of it. All that stuff is wasted time and energy if you're not actually implementing it. So you'll want to do these things with a purpose, and like PJ said, customize them for your specific operation so that you can utilize them.
Perfect. Yep. So obviously one of the other topics that kind of goes into everything we've touched on thus far is, what to do or what to expect when that claim inevitably occurs in the industry, because whether you're operating for 1 year or 30 years, eventually you're going to have that incident. And so just understanding what to do is crucial. And like Chris said, on the incident response can make the difference between a claim not paying it out at all or paying out a couple of $1,000s versus paying out 6 figures or more, right? So, I think what we look at is, when do I notify claim? And one of the biggest questions we see is, well, hey, what's a claim, right? What's an incident? What's an injury? General good rule of thumb is, and it's can be tricky, right? Because you can have bumps and bruises on every jet ski ride, right? Or different things of that nature. But, if someone communicates to you an injury, and definitely if they require third-party medical care, right? So that's they're going to urgent care, or you have to administer some kind of first aid, or even calling an ambulance. You definitely want to notify the insurance company, because the last thing you want, again, when we touched on with incident response, is something you think is minor or doesn't need to be reported or investigated further. You kind of let that customer go away, and then 9, 10, a year later, 10 months, a year later, you get a lawsuit in the mail and you have no idea don't remember who this person is, didn't document anything. And then you and the insurance company are behind the 8 ball with what this person is claiming, with no documentation, nothing to fall back on. So again, is anything that kind of falls in that line of saying, this could become something, or definitely third-party medical care involved. Notify your insurance company as soon as possible. And that conversation can always just be, hey, we don't think anything's going to come of it, but we wanted to put you guys on notice. That way they're aware of it. They may go ahead and advise you and consult you and say, hey, go ahead and, do X, Y, Z, or let's do this, or let's go ahead and contact the injured party. But then again, that next step, that adjuster is going to be assigned. They're going to want to review the effects of what happened. They're going to request that additional information, and then hopefully, again, you've got the policy you need. My biggest thing with what we've seen in some nightmare situations and talking with people before they became clients is, hey, make sure in the adjuster is also going to confirm that coverage applies to the policy. And then so you're going to kind of have that window, and that can be, setting that expectation it can be a longer process, right? So it can be weeks and months rather than hours or days with that process, and determining coverage, determining liability. Then the insurance company's decision, so much so on that documentation and information you're able to provide, is they're going to defend and argue the claim, or are they going to skip straight to a settlement because they don't have any information and they're kind of behind the 8 ball, and they don't really have anything to say, and say, okay, they're not going to take their chances in court and pay their attorneys, and then instead they're just going to offer a settlement. And that's, there's definitely a lot of consternation and argument about that. But that goes back to why that incident reporting and policy and procedure and how you handle those items are so critical. And you can see there again, prompt reporting, adequate documentation. Those are the 2 biggest factors that can change a small incident from becoming something much, much larger.
Guys, if you think about this, put an attorney hat on for a second. Think about a defense attorney and a plaintiff attorney. To BJ's point, if you're the defense and you've got an allegation and request for a settlement, and you've got a whole toolbox full of documents, surveillance video, a defense toolbox, you're going to have a much better chance at fighting that claim versus now it's 3 years later and we got to rely on people's memories. In that scenario, to PJ's point, is they're much more likely at that time just to write a check and get it off their books and make everybody happy and go away, rather than keep spending money to try to defend something when we haven't done our job, or you haven't done your job in building that defense ahead of time. PJ talked about some potentially uncovered claims and some inferiorities in some policies. No 2 policies are alike. We know that. But let's tie this back to the poll question of how do I control my insurance cost? Let's assume that you've got a policy option that's going to cost you $100,000 in premium, and you've got another one that's $75,000. They both have $1 million limits that meet your contractual requirements and will provide you a COI. So you may make what it appears to be the obvious choice, that one is $25,000 less. So let's go with that. But hang on a minute. What if, and I'm going to give you another scenario, but let's say you are doing a tour and you stop at the sandbar, or your customers are on a rental boat and they stop at the beach and they get out and they're swimming, and somebody gets hurt. They jump into shallow water or whatever happens. 3 years later, you get that letter. You alert your insurance carrier and expecting them to defend it and pay whatever damages might happen, but you find out there's a $10,000 sublimit for in-water activities. $10,000 $10,000 is probably not going to pay the attorneys to get through deposition. So what the carrier is going to do in that case is they're going to write you a check for $10,000 and they're going to say, all right, we've hit our limit because we had a sub-limit for in-water activities. You're on your own. And then at that point, not only would you have to pay any damages that would be awarded by the judge or jury, but more importantly, you've got to start paying for an attorney right now to start defending this and to go to deposition and to do discovery and all this kind of stuff. So real quickly, that $25,000 savings, which that 25 grand probably would have been spread out over 10 or 12 payments. But now you've got to come up with cash on the spot to start paying an attorney. So in the long run, that was not the least expensive way for you to go. That $25,000 savings is gone in a hurry. And in-water coverage, that's just one example of kind of holes in the parachute. We use that analogy a lot. Let me go into a few other exclusions and limitations that we commonly see. And again, I'm not going to read all these, but I'll highlight a couple of them and give you examples of why it matters or why what the policy says matters. Named storm warranty. So a lot of policies, if you have hull coverage, physical damage coverage for your vessels, they'll have a warranty in the policy that will say, essentially, if you didn't follow your storm plan that you submitted to us with your submission, or the storm plan that's in the policy, some policies will actually say you're required to, when you get a warning, if you're within 72 hours, you have to do X, and then if it goes to, or a watch, and if it goes to a warning, you have to do Y. And those policies with a named storm warning will say, if you fail to do that, there's no coverage. That's extremely important. Claim reporting requirements. This can be a big one. Some policies require that you notify them within a specific period of time, sometimes as little as 72 hours after an incident. A lot of times you may not even know about it in that time frame. It develops later, you report it to the carrier, and they say, sorry, you didn't meet the requirements in the policy. There's no coverage for that. That's a problem. Dock premises liability. Most vessel liability policies are written on a protection and indemnity form, not a general liability form. What that means in layman's terms is that it does not cover anything that would happen outside of that vessel. So somebody slips and falls on the dock or in the parking lot, anything not directly related to that vessel, if the policy is not designed properly, there could be no coverage for that. And I could spend tons of time on this too, but I'll just dive into each of these and more. But I'll just summarize by reiterating that no two policies are the same. And what you need to do to take control of this is make sure that you're dealing with an agent or broker that not only understands the coverage for themselves, because a lot of them don't have a clue what the insurance policies say, but that they're willing to take time to go over with you, explain the differences between your options, and then let you make the decision that you're comfortable with versus finding out that you've got a hole in your parachute when the plane's going down and you've had to pull the ripcord. These are so common, and I would venture to say that 90% of the time when we do an analysis and go back with our report of findings, people realize that there is a hole in their parachute that they had no idea was there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of all that to say is, where's the insurance market for water sports heading? And one of the allowed opinion in the water sports industry is, what can change the game, right? And that's kind of we agree with that. We agree that the water sports insurance marketplace needs to change. There's been too much of what we just talked about with insurance companies. There's not many available. They don't understand the industry. They put policy language in their policies as a gotcha, or, hey, we're not going to cover XYZ scenarios that are vastly important to your operation. So what are the options, right? So again, there's shifts in the marketplace. There's different things. And, for some operators, the question comes up to say, hey, what about a cooperative or a collection of operators that band together and put together to, instead of having to go out in the insurance market, let's just set up our own pool or captive or different terminology in the insurance world for that. And that's all well and good. And quite frankly, we talked to some operators that are at scale and large enough to have that option as a viable solution for them. But for, I would say 95 or more percent of operators, understanding that in order to do that, you're going to really have to, pool together and bucket together at least $1 million or if not more of upfront collateral and then ongoing investment into that type of program on your own, to where that group of operators essentially becomes the insurance company. So you have to imagine that takes a lot of time, energy, money, and effort. Again, what I would say is probably 3+ years to actually organize that and stand that up. And then at that point, you run into, who handles it when a claim happens, who sets the underwriting guidelines, and who qualifies, who doesn't qualify, and then who services that and maintains that over time. So, in theory, that idea is a good fit for very, very few operators in the industry right now, but for the vast majority, understand that the traditional insurance company and marketplace is still going to be by far and away the best option for you. And really where we take that same concept with our exclusive program that we started last summer. But we set up, we have an insurance company that backs our program. We have set up guidelines with feedback from you, the operators, from the thought leaders in the industry. And, that program continues to grow and evolve as we get feedback from operators, because again, we're saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. This makes sense. So it's constantly evolving and improving. But again, we're still, this program and other programs, you're not going to fit for everyone. But it keeps your balance sheet clean and different things of that nature. So again, the biggest takeaway I have for this is, if you're an elite operator or new operator or growing, just understand that, you're going to still have the open marketplace. You're going to have programs that reward for risk management and investing back into your business to keep everyone safe. But understand that it's not just as simple as, hey, here's how many vessels, here's what I do, just give me a quote, all things are equal. That is very far from the truth.
That's good information, PJ. And to the, cooperative captive, to the comment or the poll, why don't we just start a group and get rid of these sons of guns altogether? Very common thought. Hey, we're paying a ton of money to premium or to the insurance carriers. Let's pool together and cover our own risk. In a nutshell, that's what you're already doing, right? With insurance, by its nature, is the sharing of risk. Insurance is an extremely regulated industry, extremely regulated. Just the idea of, hey, let's just get some money together and we'll cover our own claims, is not insurance. It is, and if you're doing it for a third party, it is illegal. But I say that to drive home the point, and some of what PJ said there is that it's not just something you just throw together and it just happens. Lots of time, energy, and resources goes into not only collecting the money and the data, but the red tape with all the regulatory agencies as well. I think we're to our Q&A. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, even if you don't have questions, let's try to open a little dialogue as much as we can with a one-way webinar. Pop into the chat anything that you heard that was maybe striking to you or unfamiliar to you, or even that you disagree with. Give us your thoughts on what we've talked about today. Was it helpful? Was it eye-opening at all?
Q&A, you should see that Q&A button with the question mark on the top banner, top right part of the screen.
You said Q&A. I thought you said QR. There's the QR code that'll take you to our Watersports page on our website. We've got access to some resources there that we mentioned. I'll give that just a second before I flip to the next slide, which has mine and PJ's direct contact information on there. We'd love to help you guys out in whatever way we can. Whether you're a client of ours or not, that's what we do. So if there's anything we can do for you, feel free to reach out to us. PJ, you got anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think, again, just reach out to us. You see our contact information there. I'd also say we are very active in the Awkward Watersports Facebook group. I know a lot of you folks are as well. So constantly seeing conversations, questions in there. We're happy to jump in. And again, we are, want to help you, even if you are not a client. We'd love you to be a client, but we're just here to help you be successful. Overall, we're going to continue to have a lot of value and information continue to come out for this industry over the next remainder of the year and going forward as well. So just keep an eye out with us, follow us on our socials, and we'll look to stay in touch and see how we can help everyone.
Before we sign off there, I see that Eli posted a comment in the Q&A. He says, great info. I think the templates for the logs would be great to provide at least the minimum level of data collection operators should be doing for the intention of risk and claim mitigation. That's a good point, Eli. And we are in the process, I think PJ mentioned earlier, of branding some things, some resources for that. And you're right, that's probably one of the gray areas. Okay. I think you all probably, when I said, do you do a daily inspection, every one of you, before you crank a jet ski or start a boat, you're looking at it to some degree. But we're going to be able to provide you with a list of things that you need to be checking specifically. And again, not just looking at them, but documenting that they were done for your own records. But again, building that defense toolbox. So yeah, thanks for the comment there, and more to come on that. Because that's, you're absolutely right. That's a great idea. So thanks for spending your afternoon with us. Hope you found this beneficial. And again, reach out to us if there's anything at all we can do to help. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.